Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll begin at 7, but I would want to introduce myself and the two speakers whom we have today. Thank you so much, Lindsay and Shubir, for joining us. So good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for giving us your time. My name is Shraddha Ghosh. I'm the founder of Pixalearn. And we have been doing this program for quite some time now at Pixalearn, and we've had a very good experience with the US CPA candidates. The reason why we have assembled today is because there has been a very big change in the US CPA regulations as far as the eligibility is concerned, which has been one of the biggest hurdles for international candidates like Indians who wanted to pursue US CPA. So what we're doing today is we've gathered Lindsay Yop. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for joining us today. Lindsay is a senior manager, candidate engagement, CPA pipeline at the AICPA and NAAC A, with a background in international education and learning and development. Lindsay has worked at AICPA and NAAC A since 2013, and most recently was responsible for management of AICPA and NASBA's Experience, Learn and Earn program. Prior to joining the CPA pipeline team, Lindsay managed a number of international initiatives, including working alongside NASBA on mutual recognition agreements with international accounting bodies. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for joining us today. We really look forward to this event.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We're joined by Shubir Khatua. Shubir has been an incredible support to us from UWorld. Shubir is currently the Senior Director of Business Development, the APAC team at UWorld. He's a seasoned business leader with over 2 decades of experience in education and test prep. Having worked in London, Dubai, Cape Town, Manila, and Singapore, where he currently resides, throughout his illustrious career, he has worked with big brand education and training companies such as Euromoney Learning, Fitch Learning, Dubai World Trade Center, Wiley, and of course UWorld. This has allowed him to garner a deep understanding of what students all across the world require to pass high-stake exams. He is currently on a mission to help students in the Asia-Pacific region pass the CPA, CMA, and the CFA exams in first attempt using the new revolutionary UWorld material. Thank you so much, Shubir, for joining us today. I would request you to introduce yourself, to just talk about the UWorld course and just welcome the students so that we can ultimately start our conversation with Lindsay, and hopefully you would pitch in for the questions that you feel is good enough. Thank you.
Thanks, Shraddha, and nice to see you, Lindsay. I know we've connected a few times on email, and so lovely to see you, and thank you for being on the session with us. Of course, the session today is with Pixalearn, which is one of our premier partners in India for the US CPA program. We have a long association with Pixalearn going back with my Wiley days before UWorld purchased Wiley's test prep division, and then I moved over from Wiley to UWorld as well. And Shraddha and Pixalearn was a long-standing partner with us at Wiley, and we're so fortunate to have them as a partner with us at UWorld. And of course, the CPA credential is front and foremost in accounting and finance division at UWorld. We're really proud with the content we've created. We've got really high pass rates, and especially with people like Shraddha at Pixalearn with their fantastic live coaching as well. Bundled with our premier course, I think that makes a really good benefit for students, and that's why we're seeing extremely high pass rates on the US CPA exam. We've got great content, of course. Pixalearn students can go to the great teaching from Shraddha, but they get a great advantage with UWorld's platform as well, from our question bank to our videos to our mock exams to our study guide, all written in a way for you to crack the exam and retain the knowledge better. So lovely being with you all today, and Lindsay, once again, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
So hi, Lindsay. For all, like most of our participants today, maybe students who are exploring the options for US CPA, And obviously, there are some major differences between the international candidates enrolling for a program like US CPA. So to begin with, at a very, very basic level, I would want you to first let the people know what do you mean by this eligibility requirement and how is it relevant for candidates from like international places like India?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important to set the stage. I know that many of you are preparing for taking the CPA exam, but of course, the exam is only one part of licensure for the US CPA. And I think it's also important to understand, and I know many of you may be aware of this, but I just think it's important we're all on the same page, the different parties involved in CPA licensure. So I work for the AICPA, and the AICPA is responsible for writing the CPA exam and also grading the CPA exam. Then you have NASBA, the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy. They are responsible for getting you that notice to schedule. They also share your scores with you. So that's another party that's important that you understand. And for you as Indian candidates, they also are going to be evaluating your education to ensure that you have taken all of the required courses that your particular licensing jurisdiction requires. Then Prometric is the center where you take the exam. And then finally, your State Board of Accountancy, of which there are 55 to choose from, are the ones who actually issue your license. And the reason I wanted to set all that in the beginning is we know in the US it works very differently from almost every country in the world. Usually countries have two-tiered licensing systems where you can get your credential from, for example, in India, you get your credential from ICAI. And then if you want an audit license, you have to do a separate process for that. But ICAI is going to give you all the coursework that you have to take. They're going to tell you what you need to do. You take the exams through them, they give you the credential. Other organizations like ACCA are very similar. So we understand that that is how most of the licensing and credentialing works regarding accounting all over the world, but the United States is different. And so we also know that makes it quite complicated and difficult to understand. So I wanted to just set that out at the beginning to make sure that everyone understands the role of the different parties. And so you can kind of get a sense of why we're even talking about this and what you need to be aware of. So now that I've got that out of the way, when it comes to eligibility, we refer to that and we talk about the 3 E's: education, exam, which you are obviously all aware of, and experience. So you have to meet all 3 of these requirements to become a US CPA. And all candidates have to take and pass 3 core sections of the exam and the 1 discipline section of the exam. When it comes to education and experience, there are now 3 pathway options that you can choose from. The first is a master's degree in accounting plus 1 year of supervised experience. The second is a bachelor's degree plus 30 hours, which you may have heard referred to as 150 hours, and 1 year of supervised experience. The newest pathway that we're going to be talking about today is a bachelor's degree plus 2 years of supervised work experience. And I want to say from the start here, this is not available in all of the state boards. So not every state provides for this pathway. And I want to make sure that we're really clear on that. And we'll talk a little bit about which states currently have that. But it's really important to be aware, not every state has that. It may eventually get there, but as of today, January 30th, 2026, not every state offers this third pathway. And I also want to be clear that regardless of whichever pathway you choose, whether it's a master's degree or a bachelor's degree, you have to complete the accounting and business coursework that's required by your licensing jurisdiction. So that is not changing. Again, each board is responsible for setting those requirements. So really important that you check with the board that you're applying for licensure in to make sure you understand the specific accounting and business courses that they require as part of the overall master's degree, 150 hours, or if available in your jurisdiction, bachelor's degree.
Okay. So, can you just take us through the concept of what is this pathway B as a concept? And why do you think now of all the time, like after having ran the 150 hours rule for so many years, suddenly why is it now that AICPA or NASBA have, thought of changing this rule? Can you just take us through that pathway?
Yeah. So we actually, in the United States, the requirement was 120 hours for a number of years. The change to 150 hours started in the late 90s in Florida. So this has not been a long-standing requirement that you had to have 150 hours. And at that time, the thought process behind it was more rigor. The thought was that if you get more education, there's more rigor into the US CPA program. And so that was why that was introduced. As we have gone on, and especially in the time of rapid technology changes, and there's also been some impacts, I think, from COVID, what we have seen is that additional education doesn't necessarily mean more readiness. And we also know, particularly in the United States, but I'm sure this applies in India as well, the cost of getting that additional education was really prohibitive for a lot of candidates. They could not pay for the additional education, especially when you take into account all the examinations you have to do and all the different pieces that are required to get licensure. So it was really about providing opportunities for individuals who wanted to get the CPA, but were encountering barriers when it came to getting education. So one was to reduce barriers. And this is something that we looked at for a very long time. In addition to the AICPA, there are a lot of other stakeholders in the United States that advocate for the US CPA license, including state-based organizations. And when they would do research to find out what is the biggest barrier, the cost of education consistently rose to the top. So we did a lot of listening to address, is the education actually meaningfully preparing students? And this isn't necessarily about the exam because you all are doing a review course to prepare for the exam. There's a lot more to career readiness than just knowing the exam content. And that's an important thing to consider as well. So we wanted to make sure that is the education preparing candidates for their jobs? And then also allowing for the flexibility. We know that individuals have different learning styles. So some learn best when they're in the classroom. Some learn best when they get that hands-on experience. So we also wanted to make sure we are being inclusive of individuals who may need a different learning style to get them ready to become a US CPA. And so this allows for, time cost constraints to be addressed, career goals, learning styles. These pathways just provide options for individuals to make a decision that's best for them and that aligns with their particular goals and circumstances.
Okay. So if I'm able to understand very clearly what you're saying, that the biggest benefit that the students may get is probably people who have a 3 years of undergrad studies, as we have it in India. Probably they would not have to invest another money, maybe in terms of cost or resources and in terms of time to take a full 2-year course again. Probably they can just have a 1-year course and then they can substitute it with a work experience of 2 years. Yeah.
Yes.
So to get it clear, it means earlier it used to be 4 compulsory years of education. And this is for everybody else who's joined us here, guys, that in case of an undergrad program in India, if you're having 3 years of a BCom honors, let's say, you get 30 into 3. So each year gives you 30 credits. So ideally in India, when you used to have 90 credits, you would have to take a 2-year program to give you another 60 credits, which could either be an MCom or probably if you've already cleared professional exams like Indian CA or ICWA or US CMA, you would automatically get another 60 credits. And the reason is why? Because we have an undergrad program, which is different from US because there the college education is for 4 years. Now what is happening now is instead of having just undergrad and coupled with 2 years of education, you could have a 4 years worth of education and substitute 1 extra year, 2 extra years for just, so 3 years plus another 2 years for experience. So essentially 30 credits is being replaced by 1 extra year of experience. Is that correct, Lindsay?
Yes, more or less. And I do want to make sure, and I'm going to say this a lot on this call, making sure you connect with your licensing jurisdiction to fully understand their requirements is very important. And the reason I say that is because the AICPA and NASBA work together to create model law that we encourage states to put into their law or their regulations or their different rules. However, we can't force them to do that. And so each state is going to set their rules and regulations based on what they deem best fit for their area. So some states might have more specific requirements. I mentioned earlier about the education and business coursework. That some states have very specific courses that they require. Others just say X amount in accounting, X amount in general business, and that's the end of the story. Others say you have to take a course in this, you have to take a course in this. So very important to make sure you're checking with your board. And also, and I'm going to say this a lot as well, and you notice I removed the 120 language when I said bachelor's degree. To your point, some states just say bachelor's degree. They're not looking at the number of hours. Some states are going to look at the number of hours. So again, it's really important because the AICPA doesn't set the rules for each state. NASBA doesn't set the rules. Each board does that. So really important that you get that clarity from your state board to understand what's required. And when you have your education evaluated by NASBA, because that's a requirement to sit for the exam anyway, they'll be able to tell you, you don't have the courses you need to take these additional courses for your state. They can help you with that. But again, state board, NASBA, making sure you're really clear about the requirements is going to be a really important part of this process. And we'll talk a little bit about this later, but because it's not consistent across all boards at this time, there's a lot of confusion. So really important to make sure you're connecting with the group that has the final say so that you can get your license.
And, Shraddha, the other thing is also, when we're talking about benefits, it helps candidates with a faster entry into the workforce as well with this new pathway. So that's really important. And also on the wider perspective, it's addressing the CPA pipeline shortage as well. And that's going to be really helpful, for the industry.
Absolutely. Yes, we want to make sure that we're giving individuals as much opportunity as they can. If they want to get the CPA, we want to take away those barriers to make sure that individuals who want to get the CPA can.
Okay. To this, I just want to add one more thing, guys. In India, once you get your BCom, let's say a BCom or a BBA degree, you can actually go and write your papers because there are possibilities of bridge courses and there are international friendly state boards that allow you to enroll for another year of education while preparing for your CPA classes. That means you can finish your BCom and then parallelly you can file some paperwork and you can get enrolled for the CPA classes, get your tests, and by that time, parallelly you will be completing, let's say 1.5 years, you will get your eligibility and you will get your degree. So you don't have to wait for another year to again then apply for CPA. You can just join this course right after the BCom. So that's a big thing now. And in fact, earlier we probably had to wait for another year of education. Now, a lot of states have given you that privilege of not to take another year, but get the experience credits in lieu of that. Okay. So yeah, thank you so much for this clarity. So finally, Lindsay, what are the states that have formally adopted it? Which states have done it?
Yes. So there are 24 jurisdictions at this time that have adopted the pathway so far. And I can send a link in the chat while we're talking, but NASBA has a list of all these states. Now, when I say they have adopted the pathway, again, it's confusing, and we know that from the start, especially for Indian candidates who are less familiar with how the United States works in terms of how we regulate and govern things. But when the states have adopted those, it doesn't necessarily mean that on that date, the pathway is effective. There are many states that have in 2026, January 1st, it's gone live. Wonderful. Some have said January 1st, 2027. Some have not, adopted at all. So it's really challenging to navigate all this. And the AICPA, we have created a lot of resources to help. But we know, again, it's just a time of confusion until all these 55 boards come together and everyone has the same requirements. It's going to be really challenging to navigate. I just have to be honest about that. And we recognize that. But each state, just for some additional clarity in case anyone is interested in this, some states only do their legislative and rulemaking process every other year. So even if they want to do this new pathway, they have to wait. So that's also part of the reason why it's a bit of a slower process, because they can't just come together and say, let's change this rule. Next day it's changed and the qualifications and requirements are totally changed. It's just a lot more complicated than that. So my role as senior manager of candidate engagement is to try and help you as much as I can to navigate these changes and understand what you need to do in this time of flexibility, should we say. So I think that's just an important piece of clarification that hopefully helps a little bit.
I am sure everybody would have completely got confused now regarding where we are. So let me just simplify it a little for you. Let's just talk about some states which are international friendly. So we know that Montana, Guam, Washington, these are states that ideally are more conducive for Indian candidates. And in fact, if we look at it, a lot of Indian candidates do register with these states.
Mm-hmm.
So do you see these states adopting the new pathway B? What is the status there?
Yeah, so Washington, the pathway is active in the state of Washington, and in Montana, it took effect on January 1st of this year. So I know definitely those two states. New York is one that is sometimes friendly for international candidates. So they have also implemented the rule. I'm not off the top of my head remembering the effective date, but yes, and we do anticipate that these states that everyone will eventually get on the same page. But definitely currently you can apply to Washington and Montana and you'd be able to use the bachelor's degree pathway.
That's really good news, because I think I mean we were not aware. A lot of this information is not easily available even on the internet, and even we are like closely associated with helping students get this. But frankly, even I was not aware about Montana having finally accepted it, because you go to Google, it does not give you that information. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's going to be a huge good news for Indian candidates, frankly. Okay.
And I just put in the chat for all the students listening a link to NASBA's site, which gives you the 24 jurisdictions that have adopted the pathway so far and the effective dates. So if there are states that they're interested in applying to outside of Washington and Montana, you can be able to see those states and when the pathway will become effective.
Okay.
And just a question, Lindsay, do you have any idea when Guam might follow suit?
I do not. We've asked we have a state and legislative team, and their sense is Guam is planning to, but we just don't have any more information than that in terms of when they plan to and what that will look like.
Sure.
Okay. One more question that we keep getting from the students is that when they go to these state boards and the requirements, one question often comes up, which is the SSN requirement. Like in the US, you need to have your social security number. And a lot of Indians get confused stating that, they don't have the SSN. So, of course, Montana does not require that, and it's a huge plus point for Indian students. But, in India, we have these categories now. Since we've been doing this and helping students enroll, we know that there are certain kind of certifications. Like, for example, this is what Shubir also meant. Probably a lot of students with a particular kind of education also get registered through Guam. So, do you think the newer states who are adopting this pathway B would, like with having Indian candidates who do not have an SSN, will that make a huge difference? Like, will the Indian students actually be able to take advantage of this in maybe, let's say, next 1.5 years of time span? Do you think that's happening?
So as far as I know, there is not an appetite to change that requirement in the states that do. And certainly don't want to comment on United States politics, but I'm sure everyone understands immigration is a bit of a challenging subject. And so the social security number requirement, that's not something that is a part of this change in legislation. So from that perspective, I don't think that's going to become any easier. I don't see the states that currently do not have that requirement adding it back on in any way. So the states that are currently international friendly, I think will continue to remain so. but I'm not aware of any appetite to change that requirement. Some require citizenship or a social security number or residency. I'm not seeing states that are going to change those things at the moment.
Okay, so I'll just take a minute and decode this for the students who've joined us. It typically means that just because there's an SSN requirement in certain states, it does not mean that you cannot be eligible to write your papers. There are states which allow and which permits international candidates like India, the way Lindsay said. Montana is one of them, Washington is another one. So there is a possibility that even with Indian education, we can take advantage of the new pathway, and you can definitely sit for the US CPA papers without the SSN certificate. Of course, it's a little complicated, and that is where I think we come into picture, because we really help you navigate this path efficiently. So one more thing, Lindsay, that I don't know if you're aware, but India very recently adopted its national education policy, which what they did was they realized that there's a gap like this, because see, if you look at the technical degrees in India, they are 4 years. And that's the reason why you see a lot of students from India opting for a master's program or an equivalent program in the US directly. Now, that was not happening for the commerce-based students. So what we did with the NAP program was we introduced a 4-year college education. And in fact, now we are seeing through, because this program got implemented somewhere around 2020 was the thing, but the effective date was somewhere around 2021 or 22. Now we do have students in the 4th year, like after the implementation of that program. And also the best part is that this program, what was happening earlier in India was, if you were not completing the 3 years, you would not get anything. So 3 years of BCom, and if you don't complete it, you're left with nothing. So what NAP did was they created levels, and they said each year of education would give you something, maybe a diploma, so the last year you have a choice of even getting a dissertation or a research paper. So there are people now who are joining the work, like who are in the education cadre, who are in the 4th year of your NAP program. Now, so we know 3 years what we have to do, right? We have to take a bridge course and we have to get them enrolled. But what about these students who've just entered their 4th year? When do you think these are the students who should be signing up for, when should they be beginning their eligibility requirement? When they enter the 4th year or after they complete their graduation?
So I think it just depends on what your goals are and how quickly you want to take the exam. What I would recommend, the same process that you would do after you complete your BCom, you would need to work with NASBA to get your education evaluated. And I think, candidly, the sooner you get that done, the better, because when you do that evaluation, you can submit to NASBA the courses you're currently taking. So if you're in the middle of your 4th year and you say, I'm taking these courses right now, I'm taking these courses my final semester, what am I missing? That's where NASBA can really come in and help you. So I think probably in that 4th year is when I would recommend submitting your education evaluation to NASBA, so that you can make sure within that 4th year that you've got everything covered, because NASBA will be able to let you know where your gaps are.
And Lindsay, many state boards allow students to apply for an ETT as well. Maybe you can share some light on that. Authorization to test.
Oh, yes. So that's not my area of expertise, unfortunately, so I'm not able to really comment on that. But yes, the authorization to test, where you're allowed to take the exam because you've got those qualifications, right? Because you don't have to have completed all of your education in order to sit for the exam. I'm not aware of states that only allow you to sit for the exam at 90 credit hours. I believe currently you still have to have your 120 completed. That's another part of the complication because of how we're changing the definition of the bachelor's degree. And I know this sounds like I don't have an answer, and I'm being a little wishy-washy, and that is not intentional. It's just because it's confusing. It's confusing for all of us. And so I hope that I'm not adding confusion here, but this is not unique to Indian candidates. This is also something that our domestic candidates are wrestling with as well. And I completely recognize that. And this was not AICPA's decision to make all these changes, but we are trying to, as much as we can, support you. So Again, check with your board, do your evaluation with NASBA. They really can tell you for your specific circumstances what you need to do to be able to take your test, when you're allowed to take your test, and be able to move forward from there.
Okay, I
Yeah.
need to add a word. Yeah, Shubir, you take it, then I'll just.
Sure. I mean, I think as Lindsay said, you've got to check with your respective state boards. From what I understand, and again, don't quote me on this because check the correct information. I think Guam, Alaska, and Colorado allow students to apply for an authorization to test if they're in the final semester or within 60 days of graduation. But again, just check the latest information on the state board website.
Yeah, and I would probably just add a couple of words here. For those students who are in the fourth year, probably the only difference that you're going to have now compared to the earlier program was earlier we used to have a bridge course that you had to sign up and you had to get your paperwork through those boards that would allow you to sit for your exam at 90 credits. The only difference now is you will not have to apply for a bridge course, but you would still have to go by those boards that allow you to write their papers with 90 credits. You don't have to invest that extra money for doing a bridge course. That is the only difference. But the boards that were allowing you earlier probably would continue with the boards that will allow you now to write this paper. So you would essentially be saving on that money and the time of doing that extra bridge course, if that is what makes it really applicable for Indian students. Is that correct, Shubir? You feel what we have said is correct?
Yes, but again, navigating the maze of all the information, I think everyone should do their homework. So.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much even for putting that one thing here. I think one thing that a lot of people have asked us after this pathway came into picture is, let's just say that a student gets enrolled in this 120-hour pathway, like the new pathway, and let's just say that they want to now navigate, or let's say have their license issued from a state which does not follow the 120-hour pathway. In that case, where is that student? Like, does he need to get their eligibility again to get the license, or how is it going to pan out then?
Yeah. So again, this is the challenge of having a bit of patchwork legislation at the moment. So yes, let's say you get your license in Montana and your firm that you're working for does work in a state that has not passed this pathway yet. You would not be able to provide services that require a CPA license in that other state. Some states are trying to put in what we call safe harbor language, but this issue of mobility is something we are very concerned about. So it is, again, and I do not mean to pass the buck here, but it's a state-based, it really, you have to make sure you're checking with your state. And this is something that firms are well aware of, so they are working hard to understand where their staff members, if they get a license with the new pathway, might have challenges. And so that's something, if you get a license, your firm should be able to help you with as well, to make sure, because they have to be in compliance. It's not just you as a CPA, your firm also has to be in compliance with those licensure requirements to make sure that you are allowed to provide services in the state in which you have clients.
Okay,
and I think late last year, NASBA and AICPA updated the Uniform Accountancy Act as well, to recognize a 120-hour pathway, the bachelor's degree plus the 2 years of experience, as a valid substantial equivalent pathway to licensure, ensuring mobility across state lines. But again, check with your individual state, because each have their own criteria.
So actually, it's still a stage where a lot of things are changing. And as students, I would suggest, don't assume anything. Please come to us. We would probably get in touch with the right authorities and we'll help you sort this. So don't make any assumptions, because we've not reached the stage where we can, pinpoint and say that everything is ironed well. We are still processing this information. A lot of it is in the process. So you please check with us before you take any decision. Okay, so that is what I would say as far as this is concerned.
Absolutely. And Shabir, you mentioned the Uniform Accountancy Act. That is the model law that I referenced earlier. So from our perspective, 100%, that's what we want. We want there to be protected mobility. We want states to have the same requirements. So that is our effort. That is the model law that the AICPA and NASBA have worked together to create. But again, the states, it's up to them as to whether or not they want to adopt that particular law model language that we provided them.
I think the gist is that, there's a general movement to trying to make this happen. That's sort of important. And, from moving to a state-based system or to an individual-based system where you have that mobility. But I think that's a work in progress. But the general trend is moving in that direction, which is great.
Correct.
Okay, I would probably decode it for the Indian students, guys. For those of you who are not aware, see, in India, the accounting profession is being governed by only one body, which is the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. And these are the people who administer your eligibility. And since in India, we do have the concept of state autonomy, but ICAI as a body is a federal body which takes care of the accountancy profession throughout India. And in India, we have a very strong concept of center and states, but center rules the state. Compared to that, if you look at USA, it is a group of 55 states, and each of these states have a different state board. So you think of it like this, that imagine if all the states in India would have their individual ICAI and they would make their own rules. So in fact, each of these states have their own rules for determining who should sign up, how many hours of credits do you need, how should they be giving you the license, whether they want them to, whether they want you to have SSN or not. So it's like saying 55 decision makers. And that is why the problem comes, because some are international friendly, some aren't. And that's the reason why this gets very complicated. And now with the added problem of the new pathway, which may be a huge relief to everybody, but this is a stage when a lot is being conceptualized and effectively implemented. And probably it's going to take some time. So we need to be in sync to make sure that we have the right information that's available to you to help you take the right decision, frankly. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Okay, one more concept that we have in US CPA, Lindsay, is that, we have these NAAC A accreditations in India, which is this National Assessment and Accreditation Council. So historically, there are certain universities in India which gets a NAAC A+ accreditation. So in very simple language, it states that these are good universities, and these are universities where a 90 credits, that means 3 years of a BCom is equivalent to a 4 years education in US. So basically you do a 3 years BCom and you get a 120 credit. Now, do you think with the new pathway happening, there is still a chance of this NAAC A accreditations being influenced or playing a role in the candidate? Because it's like 30 credits being saved, right? So do you think there is some truth in this, and should we, kind of communicate that to our students? What is your take on it?
So again, I think it's really going to be up to the states. And just for some information, again, this is not unique just to Indian candidates. We have a lot of individuals in the United States who, let's say it's the 150 requirement, they have 120, and they're looking to figure out how can I get, my 30 extra credits. And so some states will accept courses from, community colleges, while others say, no, it has to be a master's level course. So if there are states that currently accept this, they will likely continue to. I am not aware of any that have said, oh, great, we want to accept these accredited courses from India. Now, that's not to say they won't, but that's not something I'm hearing as part of this new pathway.
Okay, so very frankly, guys, this is something that I also want to put across. Let's not assume that a NAAC A1 accreditation in India would save you 30 credits. Please go with the assumption that it is totally up to chance, because of late, we've also not seen a lot of examples of NAAC A1 colleges being given 120 credits, which was 3 years of undergrad program. So for all practical purposes, if you get it, it's like huge luck for you. But if you don't, that is the norm. That is not the exception. Just keep that in your mind. Okay, so that's something that I wanted to clarify, because a lot of students come with the assumption that, with 3 years, since it's a NAAC A college, we have it on our university website, so automatically they're eligible. And we have to keep telling them that, no, that's not the norm. So you don't have to go and approach this with that concept. And also with the eligibility now becoming like a 3-4 layer process, so for Indians, essentially it means you need to get your transcripts in a particular format with the required documents, sending it to the US, getting their nod, and then opening an account in CPA portal, which again takes some time now. So the process has got elongated, and the more assumptions you make, it's more difficult because you end up losing 3-4 months time in your preparation. So it's better to go for something which is like an absolute certainty, rather than something which may or may not work for you, because then we'll have to restart the entire process again. Yeah. One question that keeps coming to us, Lindsay, with now the COVID opening up the entire economy and the test centers opening in India, Philippines, and all of these places, a lot of students from non-commerce background, they are reaching out to us, like BTech, English honors, economics honors. And frankly speaking, I'm a little still skeptical, because at our institute, especially, unless and until I'm 100% sure that, the money and the time that they're going to spend in getting the evaluation sorted, if I'm not too sure, I do not really, help these candidates, because that's a norm that we follow, that we don't want to give you false hopes. But how true is it? And what is the trend in the US? I would want your take on both of it. What is your take on all of these students who do not have maybe a single hour? Like now, surprisingly, I'm having students from law background and BTech background who are wanting to come to US CPA. And it's like a huge surprise to us. But at the same time, I'm a little clueless because I get a little skeptical. So what is your take on it? And what would you advise, providers like me to, how do you want us to go through it?
Yeah. So I think in general, in times of economic uncertainty, the CPA is seen as something that is incredibly stable, that you'll never be in want for a job. That's the view of the CPA. And so even in the US, during times like this, we'll see individuals who have no background in accounting want to begin pursuing a CPA. And so we are certainly, if someone has the aptitude and the time and the willingness to study and do what they need to do and take the courses to prepare themselves, take and pass the exam, I would certainly encourage that. I think it can be certainly a challenge, especially if you don't have that background. But what I will say is, if you have an English major or have a law degree, you have that bachelor's, but you still have to take the business and accounting coursework that your state requires. So you can't just take the exam with a degree in English. You have to have that education in accounting and business to back it up. So certainly it's possible. And if an individual believes they have the acumen to do it, I would certainly encourage that. I'm very encouraging to anyone who wants to be a career changer, as long as they understand, as we get older, it becomes more difficult to learn new subject matters. It's why I can't learn a new language at my age. It's more difficult than it was when I was in college. So if someone wants to do it and they believe they have the technical knowledge and ability, then certainly I would encourage them to do so.
Okay.
I think an important point here, Shraddha, is, yes, it's a great encouragement that, people are interested to do it, and that's fantastic. But like Lindsay said, you need the accounting and business credits. So it doesn't matter whether if you just have a bachelor's in something else, they still have to invest a lot of time in getting probably at least 24 semester hours in accounting and 24 to 36 in business, depending on the state. So it's still going to be a lot of investment for them to get those credits. But it's certainly great if that's the passion.
Yeah, but see, that is what frankly speaking, Shabir, I have not been accepting a lot of these candidates because I have no idea how to navigate them through the process. Because, when these students come to us, they assume that I'll somehow make them write the paper. And I have to tell them that I cannot even help them submit their paperwork right away. They will have to get that requisite credit. Unless and until they do that, we don't generally sign up for the course. But yeah, there have been people like pursuing CS in India. So this is just for the students who joined us now. If you've been pursuing some courses which have accounting and business credits, which liaise with what are the requirements of AICPA. For instance, if you've done CS in India or if you've done ICWA in India, even with a non-BCom or a BBA background, there is a possibility that we can work something around. But a completely, off a student like a BTech or an English honors, it's not that smooth a ride. It is possible because there are courses where we can help you sign up for, but maybe it is not immediate. That's number one. It's not that you come to me and I will immediately sign you up for this course. You will have to probably put in more efforts to first be eligible, and then only you would be able to sit for the paper. And I think that's going to be good even for you, because they would have a base that would help them, and eventually that will probably be required for you to clear your CPA exam. So I think that, so you have to think in terms of investment of time and resource in first being eligible and then applying for the course.
Yeah. And Shraddha, you touched on an important point, because it's not just getting the credits, but the knowledge gap is going to be too significant as well.
Yes.
So, if they just come in and they get into your regular class, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, exactly. And see, one, like we, Lindsay, I don't know if you've ever seen, but we take these podcasts called Chapters of Change, where we kind of take the journey of people who've cleared CPA and we, share it with everybody else. And there was a student who said this, and I really took it to my heart. He said that the purpose of doing CPA is not to bring misery to you, right? You should be able to enjoy the course, because at this age, nobody is forcing you to do a course like CPA. So the fact that you are joining up for a course like that typically means that you are really hungry for knowledge and you should enjoy the process. The moment that balance tips off and it starts being a misery, then you should know that you're in the wrong path, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
One thing that, students keep asking us is like, let's say we have signed up for the eligibility. A lot of these students who sit for these exams in India are working professionals who sign up for the course, probably have a lot of good intention, but then eventually life takes over, or maybe the work is difficult. In that case, once they get their eligibility, let's say, is there a time span within which that eligibility is applicable and then it lapses? Or what is the tenure in which that eligibility is still valid?
Yeah, so I believe it's, for experience, I think it's within the last 5 years. So I think the education part, that is not as much of a concern as the experience. So 5 years. If they're working, that really shouldn't matter. In terms of examinations, if once someone begins to take the exam, I think this is not exactly your question, but just wanted to give this for clarity. The exam, when you pass the exam, your scores can expire. So it used to be 18 months. Now it has moved to 30 months in all states. So after you start taking the exam, your scores remain valid for 30 months after you pass.
And I think just to add to that, I think it's two components. So one is how long it is, but also your NTS. I believe the NTS is 6 months from the date of issuance. So that's something they need to take care about as well. And also the extension of credit. So candidates who had valid unexpired credits as of 1st Jan 2024, that's extended till I think June 30th, 25. So I mean that's all passed, but that was there for candidates, to take into account.
And then I think I've got confused here. Probably have not been able to put my question. Well, see what has happened. I'll tell you. There were students who had joined the US CPA program, let's say in the year 2020. They got their eligibility, but then COVID happened and they were, changing jobs, and they didn't end up writing a single paper. So now the state is that they have got their eligibility. And now when they approach us, their first question is that eligibility valid? Or do I have to again apply for eligibility? So is there any deadline for that eligibility to be valid, or they would have to again go through the entire process of getting being eligible? That I think was the question that I want. So yeah, of course, what you guys are saying is true, that there is the expiry of the courses that you've already completed. So there is a tenure of 30 months, and after that, it does not last. And even NTS is an expiry of 6 months. But what about these candidates who got their eligibility and now they want to restart their US CPA journey? Because you'd be surprised to know there are a lot of students like that who are approaching us now.
Yeah, so as far as, like I said, the experience has to be usually within the last 5 years. But if they're working, that shouldn't be an issue. Their education also wouldn't expire. However, if the state board has changed, like, they required, in 2020, they required X number of credits and they've changed it to these number of credits, or they've created specificity around the types of courses, that shouldn't be an issue. However, they can always check with NASBA to have their education evaluated again to make sure that they have met all the requirements and that there are no issues.
Okay, yeah. So that makes sense. So basically, for these students, our suggestion is to get in touch with us. And the first step is let's write to your state board and understand from them whether they would still consider that eligibility and whether the norms have changed. And once only after they have given you a nod, then should we proceed. If they want you to get reevaluated, you will have to go through that. Else, probably they'll guide you what's the best step. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, like another question that students keep asking me, and now especially see there are a lot of Indian students who are settled abroad, and many of them are also in the US. And now we are finding these students, maybe they've been working for some time, but now they want to sit for the US CPA exams. But because of the fact that they are in the US or in some other international location, and all of the transcript processing, which is like a huge thing in India, because not every university gives you online accesses, and not every university has their own way of coming up with transcripts. In fact, there are some universities who wouldn't even know what is the full process. Okay, so for these students who may not be in their home state or in the place where they have to get their transcript, is there any kind of help that they can get from some agency, maybe on a paid basis, where all of this process of processing the transcript and stuff can be taken care of? Like, are you aware of it?
I am not aware of anything that I'm not aware of any company that does that. I'm certainly happy to look into that and see. I can contact my one of my colleagues at NASBA to see if they have any information on that, but I am not personally aware of anyone that provides that service.
I think NASBA has the NASBA International Evaluation Services that you can use. But in that, I believe, but again, just check for the latest information. They have something called an education verification option, which is an extra fee that you can pay, if university cannot issue official documents in the way they expect to receive it. So again, check with NIAS. So
Shabir, actually, we had a student who got registered. She was in California when she wrote her papers, and she had her evaluation done from Calcutta. All her paperwork was from Calcutta University. And in fact, when we were advising her, we suggested that you take care of this or you take help of this NASBA evaluation verification services. And actually, with that extra fee, which is, I think, anywhere in the range of $200 to $300, which is much reasonable, because the other option for her was to fly down from US to India and then get it all sorted. So it definitely is an option worth considering if you are an international candidate and if you really need help in doing that processing. But obviously, it has to be some university with which the US parties also have access and experience with. If it's a completely new university, you wouldn't really know how much they can assist you, but that is an option worth considering, because I, for instance, have a first-hand experience of somebody who took advantage of that and ended up saving a lot of headache and also a lot of money in the process. Yeah, so that's, I think, a very good information, which a lot of students don't know. Okay. One last question before we open the forum for the general public, which is, again, I know the answer for this, but I would still want you to take it, because a lot of students ask this question to us. Like, we tell them about states, and then we tell them, see, you can register in one state, because eligibility is very important. Because again, I'm telling you about the same student. She first went to California, and she was staying there, and the California board did not recognize the CA education at all. So when she got her eligibility, she got only 90 credits. And then when she asked us, I said, why do you want to take the hassle of taking another 2 years of education in the US, which is really pricey? Why don't you reapply? And this time, maybe do it from an international friendly state like Montana, which has a history of accepting Indian CA candidates. And she did that, and it was really good for her. But then students ask us this question that, let's say if we are actually looking at a state for eligibility, which is very important, because without that, you don't even think of licensing, right? Is it possible to get a license from a separate state which gave you the eligibility? Like I enroll myself in one state, be eligible. Can I get the license from another state? Because I'm now staying, let's say, New York. I got the eligibility from Montana. Is that possible to get the license out from some other state and get the eligibility from some other state?
I think it depends. I think in this case, if it's just a matter of when you take the exam, that's fine. If it's more about the issue of 120, those new licensure pathway changes, that's a little different. But in terms of, I took the exam, I submitted my paperwork for Montana, I completed and passed the exam. As long as they meet the eligibility requirements for that other state and they have their education and experience and all of that, that shouldn't be an issue.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
Shraddha, some states allow it, but some, I believe, like California, and that the rule may have changed as well, they may ask applicants to have a reevaluation of education. So again, just depends state by state.
yeah, and I will add something here, guys. Even when you're applying for a license, there is a possibility that there can be an evaluation only for license. There can be an evaluation for eligibility to write your papers also. So licensing is a different process altogether. The first step is to be eligible and write your papers. Once you're able to do that, we can take licensing as a second step, where of course all the issues that we have, let's say you have enrolled with 120 hours state and now you want to get to a state with a license of 150 hours. There is a process which may be a little cumbersome, but it is completely doable. And I think that is where our institute pitches in, because we make sure that we are connecting with the right places, which saves you time, effort, and energy. Okay, thank you so much, Shubir and Lindsay. I see there are a lot of chats coming up in the forum. The first question I would want, Srinath Bhatt is asking a question where he's saying, I completed CA articleship and I also have 4 years of experience in Indian tax, accounts and GST. Will that be counted as an experience for CPA practice? Okay. I think he's talking about the licensure or the new pathway B provision. Lindsay, what do you say? Yes, Srinath, we have your question. Lindsay answering that.
Yeah, so for the experience, if it's an international friendly state like we've been talking about, some states don't accept international experience and others do. So as long as you have met that education requirement in your state, and you have that experience and your state accepts that international experience, you should have no issue with applying.
Yeah, so it typically says that if your experience has been in lines of accounting, taxation, or auditing, which is required by the states, and if your state accepts the pathway B provision, ideally that should not be a problem. Your 2 years of work experience can be taken from there. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we have another question from Himanshu Garg. He's saying that he's totally confused now, which is completely understandable. But he's saying that does he have to choose a state before he's preparing for the exam, or what is the right time and he should be choosing his state before he's planning? See, first of all, planning a US CPA in India is a big thing, Lindsay, because for the fact that it is extremely a costly affair. You end up, as institutes where we're providing training, you won't believe our biggest struggle is in making these students go and write their first paper. Because the cost of sitting for the paper is like 80,000 Indian rupee, and the fear that, if I don't clear, I'll have to come back again. That's number one. And second is the pass mark is pass percentage is around 75, which is unthinkable in India. So, people have a lot of issues in even taking that call for signing up for the course. So where do you think is the right time for them to address the questions about which state and which is the right time?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm sure that you all in your coursework, you understand the states that are most international friendly. So I think looking at that list, making sure, do I need a social security number, all those basic things at the top, and then looking at the pathway, what pathway is available in my state, and sort of drilling it down that way. But in terms of the question of, do you choose the state before you take the exam, you don't need to have selected your state until you are applying for your notice to schedule. That is you've really made a decision. So you can begin to prepare for your exam and take your review courses without having chosen a state. But to your point, it is complicated. It's already challenging enough just with the pass rates and things like that. So it's important to have that information in the top of your mind as you're preparing for the exam. But then once you have your NTS, that's when you say what state you want your scores to be sent to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so basically it means before you start your eligibility, you will have to know which state has to give you the eligibility. And again, before you apply for license, you again have to figure out which state is going to give you the license. Is that correct, Lindsay?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Parneet, I think if you have your video on, I would love you to take your question directly to both Lindsay and to Speed. Parneet Kaur, are you there? Now see, that is a problem. I use this link for my online classes also, where the videos are generally off. So I don't know if these students would be able to turn their video on, but I would request. Parneet, are you there? Can you unmute yourself and can you switch on your video? Otherwise, I'll just take your question. Are you there? Okay, I think we'll not waste time. Her question is there a possibility that I seek guidance directly from AICPA or NASBA about which state is best for me after I provide my academic credentials? So is there a possibility that, we can have a kind of a check before I take the final call? And if, let's say, they don't trust us, and if they really want this information from the horse's mouth, is there a way in which they can get a check, get a recommendation from them, and then take that call? Is that possible, Lindsay?
So we can't recommend a state that they apply to, only because that's not our purview. We don't get into, we're not the licensing body, and NASBA's not the licensing body, so we can't necessarily say, oh yeah, you should apply to this state, you're more likely to be accepted. Number one, because as I said, that's not our purview, but number two, rules and regulations are constantly changing, and so we wouldn't want to make a kind of recommendation and then something have changed. So what I can say is, when you go to NASBA, have your education evaluated, I think in your review course provider, I know you give a lot of guidance because they're all international candidates that come to you. And so I think just understanding the states that are most friendly for international candidates is the best place to start, but we can't say specifically go to this state, and apply here or anything like that. That's not something that we would be able to do.
Okay. Okay, one more question. This is Manya's question. Her question is, she's a CA qualified, so she has done a CA, and she has a taxation background in her post-qualification experience. Will that count as an experience for CPA? Will that? And also to this, I'm going to add something from my side. Let's say there are students who have taken courses like Enrolled Agents, which is in the US. So does that certificate also count as a credit?
Generally, no. The education has to be from a college or university. So it's not, enrolled agent courses would not qualify for that unless they were taken at a college or university. So, the courses that you take for your CA qualification, unfortunately, those do not count. So unless they were taken at a university that can provide a transcript. The experience, though, provided it's within 5 years of when you're submitting your application, that should be fine. And also provided that your state does not require, it has to be under a CPA and a CPA has to sign off on it. There's those types of things. So again, check with your state to make sure. But yes, in general, I would say your experience would be fine.
Okay, I have a question here because I've got a little confused. What about the CMA qualification? Let's say there is a student who's taken US CMA or maybe an equivalent like an ICWA from India. Does that count as an experience? Because we have seen with their Indian CMA, which is the Indian ICWA, they have been given credits in the US. We have had actual stories of students who have, in fact, there is a student who did not submit the undergrad credits at all. And he just submitted his ICWA credentials, and he also did CMA from the US, and that was counted as a credit. So then I don't know, I am confused now because I generally kind of keep my hands off. I am very clear that you need to either have an MCom and a BCom. So unless and until I'm 100% sure about eligibility, I don't sign students up. But I'm just trying to figure out what's happening here.
Yeah, I'm not aware that has happened. But again, it's challenging because there's 55 different jurisdictions, and some might say, sure, no problem. But what the rules say is that they have to have university education from an accredited college or university. So you mentioned don't make assumptions. That would be what I would say. Don't make assumptions. If you want to try and submit it and see what happens, you're welcome to do that. As far as I know, that is not in line with the rules of what the states have said they will accept. And just, I work for AICPA and SEMA. SEMA qualifications do not count for education. So, and that's my own organization. So yeah, that's not something I'm aware of. Again, it's something specific to the state. You could try, but I would certainly not bank on that being accepted.
Okay. We have a very interesting question coming from a candidate called Saurav Tibrawal. Saurav's question is, in India, the transcript generation process is so cumbersome that he's saying, what if I just give you my degree certificate and I don't give you a transcript? Will that work? What is your answer to that, Lindsay?
No. And only because when they evaluate your education, they are looking at the number of hours you have in accounting and business courses. If you just give them a degree, that doesn't say what courses you've taken, if you successfully passed them. So they're not just looking at whether or not you have a degree, they're looking at the number of courses in specific subject matters that you have passed.
Okay, one question that I want to add here is when you say the subjects, so ideally when you're saying business, because business as a term does not exist in Indian qualification. You have accounting. Yeah, so we have accounting, we have auditing. So auditing and taxation also counts, right? Accounting, auditing, taxation, and commerce. Is that correct?
Yes.
Not economics, right? Not economics.
Economics is not some may count it as a general business course, but no, economics is not something that is required in those categories. Some states might say, sure, your intro to economics counts as a business course. Some may not. So again, the transcript evaluation is the really important part.
Yeah, so just to decode it for the Indian students, traditionally when you look at your BCom or a BBA or an MCom or an MBA program, ideally you need to have some courses which should have accounting, auditing, taxation, and something which is like commerce or a commerce equivalent in order to be eligible to get those 30 credits each year. So there are situations where somebody may get 160 credits and not be eligible to write the course because you don't have the required credits for accounting and business credits. Yeah, so just be careful, don't assume, get in touch with us, we'll help you understand what's the right eligibility, and only then you should take that process. Because see, more than the money that you're going to waste in the process, I think time is the biggest resource, and we don't want you guys, as it is, you take a lot of time to decide that you want to take this course, and now going back and forth, sometimes the eligibility becomes such a hurdle that we have students even backing off after the entire entanglement of the eligibility process. So let's not make it that complicated. And guys, it is possible because at our institute for the last couple of years that we've been running this, we have made sure that once you sign up for the course, we parallelly start you with the eligibility so that by the time you write your first paper in 3.5 months, you do get your eligibility done. So we kind of also chase you to get your eligibility paperwork done very well, because we realize that is the biggest hurdle for people not to write their first paper. And we feel that the moment you write your first paper and you clear it, our job is done. Then the next 3 papers, you would do it yourself. Yeah. So I would conclude this session. Thank you so much, Lindsay, and thank you so much, Subir, for having undergone that effort of organizing something, because I think it's really a very important session. There's a lot of misconception that that goes on in the market, and especially people look at these couple of videos coming up and they just assume that you can just have a BCom and you don't need another year of credit. And they don't understand that probably this is not the right time where you can just assume that a 3 years BCom would be good enough. So a lot of our misconceptions got addressed today, and I'm really thankful.
Shraddha, can I raise one small question? I was trying to jot it down, but it has not been taken.
Okay, yeah, sir. Okay. This is the last question for the day, guys. Okay, but yeah, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Here in the session, it was mentioned that it's a 30 months, which is the eligibility of past papers. After that, they probably lapse. But at some point of time, I came to know, or rather, I was actually counseling with some other other school that's working there in India only. So they have told that having passed the exams, I can still go in for getting that state boards once again eligibility done. Mine is basically a New York state board through which I have taken the exam, but it is like 4 or 5 years old, or maybe even older than that. and wherein I was told that it is 10 years eligibility at that time, that New York State Board alone. So just wanted a clarity
no,
on
Sarthak,
that.
see, one thing is very clear, that the exams, after you clear the first paper, in fact, earlier the time that you were talking about, the eligibility was strictly 18 months for the
No, I have cleared all the 4 papers.
No, but okay, you are saying you've cleared all the 4 papers, but your license has not been processed. Is that
Yeah, license not processed.
Okay, and I'm assuming that you wrote your papers in the US. Is that correct?
No, I wrote it in Dubai.
No, then the requirement is very clear. You need 3 years time after you clear all the 4 papers to get your license. If you are not taking your license out within the next 3 years, and that's not just applicable for Dubai, it is applicable for all international locations, Middle East, which is Dubai, India, and Philippines. If you have not got your license within 3 years of clearing all the 4 parts of the exam, all your scores are invalidated. You have no history and you will be required to write all these papers again. The only difference is if you have taken it in the US. In the US, if you've taken the exam, I think there were some provisions earlier. I'm not too sure what is the situation now. But in the US, if you're writing the exams, probably there may be some hope at some point of time, but definitely not in international locations.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking this. I really thank both of you guys here. Thank you so much for joining us. And I really think that it has been a very, very informative session. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.